Hello and welcome to another analysis behind the news, where we provide the perspective that you can use to help save American liberty and independence. Now, last week we took a look at dueling protests regarding using climate change to increase government power. And today we focus on dueling GOP letters from the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate about passing the new NAFTA agreement. The first letter is dated November 16th of this year, and it reads in part, "Dear Mr. President, we applaud your hard work to negotiate a new trilateral free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada. Balancing the competing interests of three different countries is a monumental challenge, and we recognize your tireless efforts to protect the American worker and the American economy." And they go on, "We are, however, deeply concerned by the unprecedented inclusion in the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement of sexual orientation and gender identity language, which they abbreviate as SOGI, S-O-G-I, language for the first time in a free trade agreement. This language is housed in Article 23.9 and Article 23.12. And they go on into a number of areas here, but let me skip down to particular areas here. And it says, as a sovereign nation, the United States has a right to decide when, whether, and how to tackle issues of civil rights, protected classes, and workplace rights. At the same time, your administration is carrying out a cohesive agenda regarding policies surrounding sexual orientation and gender identity. In the Departments of Justice and Health and Human Services specifically, it is deeply troubling that the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR, has included contradictory language in the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. A trade agreement is no place, they write, for the adoption of social policy. It is especially inappropriate and insulting to our sovereignty to needlessly submit to social policies which the United States Congress has so far explicitly refused to accept. One wonders at the contradictory policy coming through USTR when other departments under your administration are working to come into alignment on SOGI policy." Now here's the kicker. In order to ensure U.S. compliance with this new language, the Obama Executive Orders number 11478 and 11246, which added SOGI to non-discrimination policies and were strongly opposed by members of this body, and again, this is from Congress, this is representatives, House Representatives, as I lose my place here, which essentially, now this was strongly opposed by members of this body, would essentially be codified by this agreement. So under the terms of the USMCA, the rescinding of these executive orders would render the U.S. in violation of the trade agreement. If the USMCA is enacted with this SOGI language, you would lose your ability to rescind these Obama-era executive orders or roll back their implementing regulations to create a unified SOGI policy. The inclusion of SOGI as part of the definition of sex in a trade agreement or the elevation of SOGI to the level of sex will cause unnecessary confusion in future international treaties as well as domestic laws and policies. It sets a dangerous precedent for courts and future administrations to build upon, and they conclude, before signing the agreement in Buenos Aires on November 30th, 2018, we strongly urge you to remove the SOGI language in Article 23.9 and 23.12 from the USMCA. And this was signed by about 46 GOP U.S. representatives. Now, if you recall from the coverage that we've given in the New American magazine as well as the John Birch Society bulletin, we specifically pointed to the language that they talk about in this agreement. Now, if these congressmen can see this threat to American sovereignty, perhaps they could also see other concerns of codifying law through these international agreements, such as the USMCA, which also includes labor protections that may even challenge and take away right to work laws in individual states. Perhaps they could also see how the USMCA would ratify the Law of the Sea Treaty without any discussion on it. This United Nations treaty has been consistently blocked or voted down in the U.S. Senate. And perhaps they could also see that U.S. law would be subordinate to the United Nations, the International Labor Organization, the World Trade Organization, and other global bodies. And perhaps they could also see that the USMCA creates a free trade commission which could freely implement changes to the agreement, including regulations, rules, and committee overseers, all without the consent or approval of Congress. And if you extend the lines on this commission, you'll find that this commission could eventually have the power to control tariffs, imports and exports, and even industrial and agricultural production. Now, if that sounds a bit over the top, then just do a bit of online research to see what a commission is capable of. Specifically, look up the European Commission. It's this body that comes up with and implements the policies that are voted on in the European Union. The Commission is not voted in, and it's unaccountable to the average citizen. Now, we mentioned a second letter. 4 days later, on November 20th, 12 GOP U.S. Senators wrote to the President saying, "We stand ready to assist in helping you secure a pathway to congressional consideration of the recently concluded USMCA, this 115th Congress. We are concerned that if the administration waits until next year to send to Congress a draft implementing bill, passage of the USMCA as negotiated will become significantly more difficult. It is still possible," they write, "for the current Congress to consider and vote on the USMCA before the end of the 115th Congress," which is at the end of this year, "and do so by using Trade Promotion Authority's procedural protections, including a simple majority vote in the Senate. Your administration can preserve the option of passing the agreement this session by submitting to Congress as soon as possible and before November 30th, which, folks, is at the end of this week, a copy of the final legal text of the agreement and a draft statement of administrative action as required by Section 106 of the Bipartisan Congressional Trade Priorities and Accountability Act of 2015. These documents can be transmitted to Congress at any time, including prior to the agreement being signed and on any calendar day. This step would also start the clock on a mandatory 30-day waiting period before a draft implementing bill may be submitted to Congress on a day when both chambers are in session. If you choose to pursue consideration of the USMCA before the end of the 115th Congress, we commit to working with you in a consultative manner to draft implementing legislation that would win our votes, as well as a majority in the House and Senate. Thank you for your consideration of this request. We stand ready to assist in helping you secure USMCA passage this Congress." Now, these are from U.S. Senators, and this is from Pat Toomey, Lamar Alexander, Steve Daines, Deb Fischer, Jeff Flake, Ron Johnson, John Kyle, James Lankford, Mike Lee, Rob Portman, Ben Sass, and Ted Cruz. So it appears they are willing to cut through a bunch of red tape as quickly as possible to see a vote happen on the Implementation Act in a lame duck session before year's end. So we have to ask, do they not know of the sovereignty threats that this agreement poses? Remember that this was negotiated by a group of globalists that do not share Trump's enthusiasm of Americanism. The chief negotiator is Robert Lighthizer, a longtime member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Or are these senators turning a blind eye to these threats? Well, we don't know. So regardless, if we are to stop the USMCA from coming up in a lame duck session, then we need to act now. Contact your congressmen and senators to let them know that they should vote against the USMCA. Then ask others to do so as well. Now, we've included links in the video description to help you. And if you appreciate American liberty and independence, then we invite you to apply for membership in the John Birch Society today to stand with local grassroots patriots all across this nation. And as usual, we also ask that you please like and share this video and subscribe to our news alerts. And so until next time, we'll see you then.